For this week, we have a beautiful message. God provides. God always provides. And the message is of bread or perhaps food for our body. You know, food is one of the basic necessities of the human person. And we cannot do without eating, without drinking. You know, in Hindi, there's a beautiful expression, roti, kapda or makan. Roti means bread. Kapda is the clothes that we wear. And makan is the shelter that we have, a house, a home, perhaps somewhere to live. These are the important necessities. And so today's gospel speaks about bread or the food that God provides. God provides in His own time and to His own people. It's only that we have to trust in God, trust in providence. And the beautiful miracle that we see, what we call the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. You know, for a needy person, bread is necessary. For a poor person, he hungers, he waits, he looks out. And, you know, Mahatma Gandhi has a beautiful saying, if God were to come today for a poor person, it would be in the form of bread, which means God never abandons. So the miracle of the multiplication of loaves that we see in the gospel today, as you know, that Jesus was preaching and there's a big crowd that is there. And after the perhaps preaching, you know, the people have to go back, but they have come from miles. And Jesus asked Philip, where are we to bring the bread for these people to eat? And Philip answers Jesus, 200 denarii would not be enough to buy food or bread for all of them. But then Andrew, who has heard this conversation of Jesus with Philip, perhaps tells Jesus, there's a boy here. He has 5 barley loaves and 2 fishes. But then he himself expresses helplessness when he says, but what are they for so many? And Jesus tells them to make the people sit down and distribute the 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes. And they have distributed, and the gospel says there must have been about 5,000 men besides the others that were there. And interesting is, after this, everyone has eaten. Jesus says, collect the extra, perhaps so as not to go waste. And they collect 12 baskets full of bread that people have left behind. What is 12 baskets of bread that is taken over and above? And they have started with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. That's how perhaps Jesus wants to show that God doesn't abandon His people. You know, the first reading also has that beautiful message from the 2 Kings, chapter 4, verse 42 to 44, where prophet Elisha also has a similar experience of the servant of a man who comes to the servant of Elisha, and gives him some barley loaves and some fruits. And the servant says that, how can I feed the people? There are 100 people here, how can we feed them? But all the same, the prophet Elisha tells, give those bread to these men that they may eat. For thus says the Lord, that they shall eat and have some left. The second reading also speaks of St. Paul in the letter to the Ephesians. He says, I am a prisoner, but I would urge you to walk in a manner worthy of your calling. Our calling is to follow Jesus, also in these needs and perhaps a special charisms that Jesus expresses Himself. What's the meaning of this parable? What is the meaning of this miracle for us? I would say 4 small things. Number 1 is God provides. The providence of God. You know, sometimes I have to go to some of our boardings and the director is very much worried. We have a boarding like this in Naganpalya, where Father Vivian is looking after 92 children. And perhaps he has that thought, who will feed them? Surprising. He says that people come and give. People donate something. there are benefactors who are giving us. God doesn't abandon the people. God always provides. Secondly, it's interesting to note that, the little initiatives always are little miracles. The miracles of little initiatives. Andrew takes this initiative. He knows that it's a helpless situation, but I give a drop of water. I give a small piece. And therefore he tells Jesus, there's a boy here, perhaps not useful for us, but he has got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And Jesus works out his miracle from this little initiative. Thirdly, little is much for the Lord. Your little is much for the Lord. Do you know that? Perhaps many very often think that I have nothing to give to the Lord. I am not worthy. I am not possible. It's not good for me. What can I give? There are so many people. Mother Teresa would say, a drop. A drop is still a drop, but it is something for the ocean. The ocean would be less than 1 drop if you don't drop it. So therefore, every initiative of yours, the small things matter. The small is big for the Lord. What Jesus wants is not your things. Jesus doesn't want your possessions, but your heart, openness of your heart. Very often, sometimes in gatherings, we find such people. When we see that it's not possible, it's not going, we cannot collect so much money, we cannot build a big church, we cannot have this thing. Small initiative. Small things are beautiful. Small things are great. And finally, I want to make a point also about what's called the leftovers. There's nothing that is left over for the Lord. Everything is useful. And so in our life, there's nothing that is left over that we throw about. Everything is useful. And there is a symbolic meaning for these 12 baskets of leftovers that were collected. And normally, if your stomach is full, you don't want to eat again what is extra. And therefore, you give it to the others. And therefore, these 12 baskets represent what God would give to the others. Namely, evangelizing the people who are on the periphery, who are on the outside, may not be inside, because the people have had their fill, the full. And so this is for the others. So this is a beautiful miracle that Jesus made to teach us not only about our food, about our personal needs, but also that God can provide and that God works miracles among us through small initiatives. And every small bit that we give, 5 fish and 2 loaves, are so much. And the extras that are there is also for the world, as it were, for evangelization.